Hey everyone! Valentine's Day is less than a month away and you're probably already looking to create some sort of Valentine's related design. If you guys follow the official Photoshop Facebook page, you may have seen them post this image not too long ago before their winter vacation. Reading through the comments, many of their users wanted a tutorial on how to create a similar effect. So today, we're going to take a boring image of snow and give it a little love. The snow image that I'm using for this tutorial was found over at deviantart.com, and if you're watching or reading this tutorial on iceflowstudios.com, I'm going to provide a direct link to the image if you want to follow along. The first thing we need to do is create our shape. You're free to use any shape that you wish, but for the sake of Valentine's Day, we're going to use a heart. Lucky for us, Adobe has included a preset heart in Photoshop. In your tools bar, grab your custom shape tool, and then at the top on your options bar, look for the heart shape using the shape finder. If you don't see the heart as one of the options, you may need to load in some additional shapes. If this is the case, click on the arrow at the top right corner of your shape finder, select Shapes, and then select Append. You should now have two heart shapes at your disposal. When you decide which one to use, drag out your shape on your document. Don't worry too much about the colors, we're going to be adding a gradient shortly. Now if you choose, you can also enter free transform mode by using your Command or Control T shortcut, and then rotate the shape a little bit to stray away from a dead-on angle. At this point we need to add snow around the edges of the heart. To do this, we're going to create a custom brush. Using a custom brush has many advantages. One, it's completely customizable, and two, it's going to save us from tedious masking. To save us a little bit of work, we're going to start with one of Photoshop's preset brushes. After you've selected your brush tool, under the brush picker, select a brush with stippled edges. Photoshop has many of these, but if you're following along, I'm starting off with the 59 pixel spatter brush. Once your brush is selected, it's time to customize. As with any brush customization, we need to reveal our brush panel. This can be activated under the window menu at the top of your workspace. Now that the brush panel is open, let's go through some settings, starting with the brush tip shapes section. For now, we're going to keep the size at 59 pixels, and then make sure that spacing down at the bottom is set to 1%. Hopping into Shape Dynamics, we're going to increase the size, the angle, and the roundness jitter all to 100%. This will give us nice variation in the snow surrounding the heart. Also, make sure that the minimum values are set to 0% and the control options are off. Next, into scattering, turn on both axes, set the scatter at 55% and the count at 1. This will allow the snow to stray away from the single path that we're going to use. And finally, let's add a texture. Under the pattern picker, select the clouds pattern. If you don't see that pattern available, just like with our shapes, you might have to load in some additional patterns. The clouds pattern is available under the pattern set. Once the clouds pattern is selected, set the scale at 130%, the depth at 70%, and then change the mode to subtract. At this point, your brush is complete. If you want to save your brush for future use, select the New Brush Preset option from the drop-down menu at the top right corner of the brush panel. Now we can start applying this brush to our design. There are a few ways to go about doing this, but I think the most non-destructive way to do so would be to add a layer mask to our shape, and then paint around the edges, which will give us the illusion that snow has fallen onto the shape. At the bottom of your Layers panel, click on the Add a Mask button to apply a blank layer mask to your shape. Once that's done, we need to make sure that our shape's path is active. Depending on the color of your shape, you may or may not be able to visibly see the path. If you take a look at the vector mask thumbnail in your Layers panel, you should see a broken frame around each corner. This indicates that the path is active. If you don't see this frame, click on the vector mask to activate it. Once the path is activated, we need to stroke it. The path. We need to stroke the path, which basically means we're going to tell Photoshop to paint our brush completely around our shape. The long way of doing this would be to grab your pen tool, right-click on the path, choose Stroke Path, make sure that Brush is the tool selected, Simulate Pressure is off, and press OK. But that's a hassle. A quick way of doing all of these steps is with your brush tool active. Simply press the Return or Enter key on your keyboard. I'm going to apply the stroke 2 or 3 times to ensure that the border of this shape gets nicely covered. Once you've applied the stroke a few times, increase the size of your brush by pressing your right square bracket key a few times, and then apply 2 more strokes by pressing Return or Enter. Continue this process until you're happy with the way the mask is looking. I'm going to stop around 125 pixels to avoid losing too much quality on my brush. Clicking on the vector mask in your Layers panel will hide the path, allowing you to see the border of your shape. If there are any areas that look too sharp, decrease the size of your brush and paint over those leftover bits. It's looking quite nice, but we need to add a few layer styles. To 1, add the gradient, and 2, add a bit of an edge to the snow. Let's start with a gradient overlay. This will be a super simple gradient. Before editing the gradient, set your angle at 90 degrees. As for the gradient's color, the left color will be the lighter of the two. I'm going to use 137FE4 for the value. The right color will be the darker one, 082463. Good. The gradient's complete. Next will be the bevel and emboss. This will give a little bit of an edge to our snow. For the structure, set the style to emboss, the direction to down, and the size to 40. Down under shading, turn off global light and change the altitude to 60 degrees. The angle could be left at 120. Because we're going to deal with the highlight of the snow using a drop shadow, turn this value down to 0. For the shadow, turn the opacity up to 100% and then choose a medium blue for the color. I'm going to use the value 1B61B0. That should leave you with a nice dark edge. Now we need to add a slight light edge with the drop shadow. Because we're looking for a highlight rather than a shadow, change the blend mode to overlay, set your color to a pure white, and then change the opacity to 100%. Down below, set the distance at 10 and the size at 5. And that should do it. Now if you want to get really fancy, you can bring in additional textures to fill in the middle of the heart. Once you place your texture on top of the shape, right-click on the layer in the Layers panel and create a clipping mask. If the texture disappears, which it probably will, turning off the gradient overlay should expose that texture. Now if you want to get really fancy schmancy, grab an image, clip it, set the blend mode to screen, and decrease the opacity a little bit. Add a basic white stroke and a drop shadow to finish it off. Fun times. And that's that. I think both results came out pretty neat. If you want to check out more tutorials or read this tutorial, get all the links and stuff, check out iceflowstudios.com. Take care.